Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends, I'm excited to be here in one room with so many key players in the struggle against child labor. And I would like to congratulate Brazil as the first country outside Europe to hold this global conference on child labor. Having chaired the conference in 1979 and 2010, the Netherlands is now honored to officially pass the baton to Brazil. Ladies and gentlemen, last spring I visited Uganda. It's a low-income country, but in the last few years, their economy is growing. Still, child labor is a problem. Children as young as 10 work on plantations or as domestic help. Sometimes the work these children do is downright dangerous, baking bricks, crushing stone, and mining for gold. But in a few areas, there are child labor-free zones, where children attend school instead of going to work. And I was happy to learn that after the Kampala conference, also the Central American countries adopted the Declaration on Child Labor-Free Zones. In one of those zones in Entebbe, I spoke to teachers, children, and youth activists. They told me the program had been successful. They said the key to this success was that it was a concerted action. The whole community was brought into action to get children back to school. Those children now get a proper education. Their parents receive assistance too, with affordable loans and training in how to save. And this is but one example of the efforts to combat child labor. We, the international community, have been working hard. More and more countries are ratifying the ILO conventions on the minimum age for a child to work and on the elimination of the worst forms of child labor. The recent ILO report shows we are making progress, but it also shows that progress is too slow. We will not meet the targets we set for ourselves. We will not eliminate the worst forms of child labor by 2016. And this obviously calls for our unrelenting and continued dedication. And let me zoom in on a misconception that is also addressed in the ILO report. Child labor is not solely a poverty problem. It is not limited to the poorest countries. It is not even at its highest in poorest countries. No, it's found predominantly among the poor in middle-income countries. In many Asian countries, the Pacific and Sub-Saharan Africa, we have seen spectacular economic progress. But it's in those countries where child labor is still rampant. And it confirms what we have long feared. A rising GDP is not the automatic solution to end child labor. It is further proof that there is no such thing as trickle-down. Growth is great as a key driver for development, but it's not a cure-all. Not everyone is reaping the benefits of their country's economic growth. Too often, women and children lag behind in the race for prosperity. They are the ones who cannot enforce their rights, and it's a sobering thought. We can't just sit back and let growth do the work. We need to step up our efforts, and we are doing so. We are making the final push for universal ratification of the important ILO conventions that I mentioned earlier. And during the last Global Child Labor Conference in The Hague, participants adopted a roadmap for eliminating the worst forms of child labor. And the roadmap has led to renewed vigor in this fight. It spells out what governments, employers, trade unions, and NGOs could and should do. It outlines actions in the fields of legislation, education, social protection, and labor market policies. Such efforts are important bricks in the wall. We are set to add another important one when we sign the Brazilian Charter on Child Labor later on. It will once more urge all stakeholders to implement the roadmap. I also welcome the government of Brazil's intention to bring the declaration to the attention of the ILO governing body for further follow-up. These are vital steps, but we have to be realistic. It will still not be enough. I feel we have reached a new phase in our struggle. In some instances, it's no longer legislation and international charters that hamper our progress. In this phase, the bottleneck is elsewhere, often outside the realm of international charters, treaties, and solutions. That means we also have to look elsewhere for the solutions. A key operative word here is awareness at grassroots level. This poses both a challenge and an opportunity. Because, ladies and gentlemen, awareness works in two ways. Let's first look at the producing countries where child labor is still a problem. There, raising awareness is a challenge that we need to meet. Often, the laws are in place, but they need to be implemented. That means that everyone must not only be told, but made to understand and feel that children belong in school, from the village elders to the mothers and fathers and the children themselves. However, in countries like the Netherlands, grassroots awareness is a totally different phenomenon, but also much needed. Mass media and the internet more and more uncover practices that consumers will not stomach. They no longer like the taste of the fruits of child labor. Our companies are very much aware of this, and this has led to some interesting initiatives. I'll give you an example. A few years ago, a Dutch television documentary raised questions about hazelnut picking in Turkey. It turned out that whole families worked all summer in this industry. Many very young children worked along, often missing out on school for weeks. The Dutch public was indignant about what they saw, and questions were raised in my parliament. Even though direct Dutch involvement was slight at best, this moved both our government and our companies into action. The Dutch embassy funded research into this matter. Subsequently, action was taken in 4 sectors where children were used in harvesting: hazelnuts, sugar beets, cotton, and fruit. Training programs and a monitoring system on child labor were established. A campaign to heighten awareness among local companies and laborers was launched. The Dutch government and Dutch companies did all this in close cooperation with the ILO, international and Turkish NGOs, and the local Turkish government. Consumer pressure has led to interesting results. That is also due to an increased receptiveness for such signals on the side of our companies. And as a Minister for Foreign Trade and Development Cooperation, I am in constant touch with Dutch companies that operate abroad. And as you might know, the Netherlands is a staunch advocate of corporate social responsibilities. Companies are required to take measures to prevent working condition abuses in their supply chain. But we want to take this further. It is no longer enough that our companies do no harm. We want our companies to do good. Increasingly, Dutch companies themselves share this ambition. They spread the word, as it were, through their own supply chain, all the way down to the villages where people have to choose. Do we send our children off to work or off to school? Here in Brazil, we have an outstanding example in a company called Nature's Pride. It's a successful Dutch business that imports and exports exotic fruit and vegetables from a number of countries, including Brazil. They not only focus on profit, but also care for the growers' communities. They make their suppliers comply with certain standards, including zero child labor. And they invest in education and water supplies, which benefit the community's children directly. It is companies like these that can make the difference. They can help heighten awareness at grassroots level on the side of producers. Also, they can help by setting an example to governments, encouraging them to shoulder their responsibility. In this way, we can raise the standard. And when it comes to labor standards, I do hope we can encourage a race to the top. To achieve this, we must bring all partners together: government, NGOs, local communities, and companies. And in the Netherlands, I try to gather them, all of them, at a regular basis to sit at the same table and talk about improvements in the supply chain. On the international level, we find we can always rely on the ILO. They provide the framework that we can operate within. One very important initiative in this respect is, of course, the Decent Work Project. As you all know, yesterday was Decent Work Day, and I cannot stress the importance of such initiatives enough. It puts a very necessary focus on what should be so obvious, but still is not: the right to normal, safe work with a decent salary. For adults, that is, not for children, and most certainly not for young children. As for combating child labor, ladies and gentlemen, we need an inclusive approach. The sense of urgency can never be too high, because children shouldn't have to work in mines, in the fields, or in households. They deserve health, safety, health, and happiness. Combating child labor, however, goes beyond moral values. It's not particularly a poverty problem, but a poverty solution. Children are a country's future. They are the ones who can take care of jobs, education, and innovation for future generations. And they can't do that without a proper education themselves, without prospects for their future. In Uganda, ladies and gentlemen, I was pleased to visit the child labor-free zone. I saw children who used to spend their days working, now enjoying their days in school. My visit was on a Saturday, yet all the pupils were there. They assured me they were very happy to be there, even at the weekend. It was only at that point that I wasn't quite sure whether I should believe them. The sad thing, however, is that this best practice is called a child labor-free zone. We need to make this term obsolete. What we need is a child labor-free world. These children have to stop working. They have to be able to go to school. We must give them time to dream first, and then they will be really able to work to make their country's dreams come true. Thank you very much.
Com a palavra, o senhor Jeroen Beinart, da Confederação Sindical Internacional.